welcome. So glad you are here with me today. We can just hang out while I paint. I am Chris Branley, for those of you that don't know me. I am a professional artist and I live in the North Fort Worth area in a little town called Keller. We have had so much rain. If you've been watching my lives the last 3 weeks, this is week 4, and we're still having rain. Today actually is overcast, but we haven't had rain. So, yay. But yesterday, it was just torrential rains. Our neighborhood in particular was okay, but there were lots of neighborhoods nearby where their creeks were flooding. The lakes around here are closed because of all the rain and all the flooding. So anyway, I am just ready for sunshine. But just wanted to tell you again, thank you so much for joining me. Hey, Kathy, glad to see you. Are you at the beach? You said you were going to be at the beach watching possibly this week. Before we get started, I just wanted to give you guys this little quote from Marc Chagall. I just love it. So he says, "If I create from the heart, nearly everything works. If I create from the head, almost nothing." So how true is that? And if you haven't been a painter for very long, maybe you're just starting out, of course you have to learn all the technical aspects, and sometimes it's kind of hard to feel it when you're painting. But once you get those technical aspects down and you really start painting from your heart, it's amazing the difference it makes. So that's just a little bit of advice for you today. But I am going to go ahead, we're going to swing around here. Let me get my gloves on. And I'm going to paint this Swiss cow. And it's a picture I've had in my files for a while. I've been wanting to paint it. But what I love about it is the backlighting. Of course the cow is beautiful, but the backlighting it makes it. It's it. So that's what I'm going to focus on, is really capturing that backlighting. So let's go ahead and get started here. Hi, Cindy. Good to see you. All right. So looks like there's not much of a glare. I think that's going to be okay. All right. So I already have my underpainting down. And I always start off putting an underpainting before I really get going on detailing and thickening up my paint. So this is just a very thin, translucent layer. I'll probably just be using a couple of brushes. So I've got a 28 Royal Sabletech, and it's a bright. And then I also have a Kolinsky bright number 14, which is smaller. So that's going to allow me to get down and do detail. So I did the underpainting with both of these brushes. So even little tiny sections, I can still use this brush and just use the corner of it to get really fine detail. But my intention is to kind of try to stay away from any detailing really towards the end of the painting, until towards the end of the painting, because I want to keep it loose and I want to keep it impressionistic. That's the style that I work in, is Alla Prima, meaning all at once in Italian, and basically just working wet into wet. So I put my layers on while they're still wet using oil paints. All right, so I've already put in some really bright sunny colors where I want my bright highlights and backlighting to be. And the thing that helps that to stand out is you can do darks versus lights, but also complementary colors. So complements are opposite on the color wheel, and when you put those next to each other, they create a wonderful vibrancy and really intensify the brightness of the color. So I'm going to start off kind of coming in this here and putting in a little bit of neutral tones over my colors. And my intent, again, is to not cover up all of those beautiful, vibrant colors underneath. And I need to make sure that I can see you guys' comments. go. Alrighty, there we are. Sorry about that. I always forget to do that. So it's hard for me to see them on my phone because my phone is filming the painting, so I have to have something that is a little more in front of me where I can see what you guys are asking. If you have questions, feel free to ask. Let's see, so I'm mixing up kind of a gray tone with a little bit of warmth. And I'm gonna start kind of down in here. So this is a really dark color. So I'm just gonna lay this in very softly, not going in too thick. Just looking kind of at the bone structure and the muscular structure of the cow. Looking for some of those darker values without covering up those blues and purples underneath. All right, let's see here. Looking for other areas that I can use that same color, some of those darker tones, and I'm going to kind of build off of those. It's almost like putting a puzzle together where you're just doing little pieces at a time. And Kathy says she's at the beach. Hope you're having some good weather. My husband and I, for our 25th this month, I can't believe this is June, we are going to go to the beach, Orange Beach in Alabama for our anniversary. So I'm really hoping for some good weather. It'll be our first trip out since COVID. Really looking forward to it. So you can see I'm putting that on really thin at this point, kind of allowing it to mix in with my undertones. All right, so we're going to be skipping around and doing different parts of the painting. So I'm not going to stay in one area too long. I'm moving towards some kind of mid to light tones. Just going to try some things out here. And I'm not worried about getting every little crinkle and fold in his skin there. Just keeping it loose. Paying attention to the structure. Going to be really important as we form the cow. And I just move the brush around so I can get different types of strokes. Yes, Kathy says, fun, so good to travel, and great, let's see, great to watch painting. I'm glad you're here. And traveling inspires a lot of painting for me, so. All right, let's see, sticking with these kind of mid to light tones. Just kind of working my way in gradually. Trying to use that same color while I've got that color on my brush. Kind of moving around, finding those little areas that are similar. Probably should use the smaller brush in that section. So one thing that I just started working on is transforming my art studio. So I'm actually in a different part of the house right now while my studio is being transformed. Not doing anything major, but I am going to be taking out my ceiling fan, and the lighting that's in there is just not really great. I love the art lights that I have, but the walls in there are kind of a sagey green, and they have a glaze over the top of them. So I actually love the walls in there, but it's not really a great color for an art studio because the light causes that green to bounce around, and so it kind of bounces around into the painting, and then anytime I try to film, my skin just looks green, and it's just not a great situation. So I finally decided to change it, and the funny thing is that I used to paint people's homes for a living. I used to do faux finishes and murals and just decorative finishes, and I never once painted anybody's walls white. It was always, some kind of color or glazing, neutrals, whatever, like soft, old world, a lot of old world stuff. And, but I decided, and I can't believe that I've decided to do this, but I've decided to paint my walls white in the studio. And they're not going to be like a stark white. It's called Dover White, Sherwin-Williams. And so it's kind of a warm white. But I just needed a nice neutral backdrop. And I'm going to really accentuate or kind of decorate with shabby chic colors. So I've ordered a really beautiful console that's going to take place of my big cabinet that I had in there. So it's going to give me some more space, and it's just going to be a lot of fun. All right, so what I'm doing now is I'm just mixing up a color. I don't normally do my highlights until last, but I like to kind of, whenever I'm doing a demo, just kind of pop those in early on just so you can kind of get a feel of how this is going to really contrast those lights against the darks. And this way I can also come back in and kind of work the background into those highlights. And a lot of times, if I think about what I want to be one of the most important elements, I may kind of start with that, just so I don't lose it later. So Abigail is saying, sounds exciting with the renovation. How do you decide what colors to use over your underpainting? So my underpainting, I kind of go crazy with my colors. My overpainting, I'm being a little more observant as to what's in the photograph and really doing colors that are going to be similar to that, and then I'm just going to be allowing some of those other colors to show through. Pat, oh Pat, I love that. Says, love how you go from regular photo to brilliant colors. Thank you. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. I like color, and I love just punching it up. So I'm just kind of moving around, doing some different parts of the painting, kind of bringing it all up. And a little bit of warmer brown tone, kind of an orangey tone in here where we got some of that sunlit area kind of coming around the curvature of his back. And I'm looking for other areas I can just drop that in ever so slightly. Sometimes I'll take that same color and then just turn it by pulling in something to kind of dirty it up. So over here, this has an orangey tone, but it's not quite as bright. So I kind of want to pop that in there. And I'm going to come in with that same color. This is a little warmer than the other brown that I had. So I'm just going to start working this in a little bit, warm things up a little bit. Aw, Kathy, she says, Grace is watching with me now. She has cerebral palsy but loves to paint. That is awesome. Painting is good for the soul. Very healing, I believe. If you haven't ever done it, I encourage you to try it. And I have an online course going on right now. You can check it out on my website. The first month is completely free. So you can get in there and kind of see what it's about. But my website is chrisbrandley.com. Just coming in here where some of these transitions are from darker to lighter. Kind of turns a little bit warm. All right, I'm going to go ahead and kind of fill this area in. Let's go with kind of a large part of the painting where there's lots of space and kind of get that filled in, and that kind of helps to kind of pull the painting together and unify it. So I'm working on getting kind of the darker brown, and I do push my neutrals to like purple, like purplish grays or bluish grays, and just work those temperatures in with each other. So this is a kind of a mid-light, so it's going to transition from this lighter portion. And I'm also thinking about the shape of the cow in the contour. So he's not straight up and down. He's kind of curvy here. That helps to give it some dimension. Looking to see where I can kind of pop in some of this color to draw the eye, let it kind of dance around the surface a little bit. Let's see, let's pop in a little bit of this color right above the eye. Gets a little darker down underneath. So those of you watching, feel free to pop in and introduce yourself. Tell me where you're from. All right, let's go a little darker and a little cooler. So I'm changing the temperature up a little bit. I don't want it to be quite as dark as these darks here, but I also don't want them to be quite as light as this. So I've added in a little bit of blue tone and gone a little darker, and we're just going to kind of work with this transition from dark to light. And notice I'm letting some of those other colors peek through underneath. That's what really creates that vibrancy. Hi, Deborah from Tennessee. And Abigail from Virginia. It's good to see you guys. Thank you for joining me. All right, this looks a little blue, but sometimes I like to punch it up and just let it be less neutral. I like to stop before I think it needs stopping, because if I continue to blend, I'm just going to lose all of those strokes and colors, and I want it to stay fresh and spontaneous. So it's important to not overwork it, even if you feel like it doesn't look like it's going to work, because a lot of times, if you just let it happen, once you start bringing up the rest of your painting, it actually starts to come together. So if you can force yourself to be patient. That's the big thing. All right, down here is a little lighter, maybe not quite that light. I'm going to darken that up just a little bit more. Cindy is asking, what size canvas am I working on? This is an 8x8. So what I'm doing is having to put the colors up here, test them out. Sometimes they end up either being too warm or too light or too cool. So it's just a matter of testing and then mixing, testing again. I think this is soft enough to where it'll work. And it doesn't have to be exactly like the cow. I use the photo as a reference, but then I kind of use my artistic license just to have fun with it. Because when you're the artist, you're the boss. You can do what you want. And it's just fun to try things out. So notice this is leaning a little cooler. And popping up against that bright, warm, orangey tone. Kind of pulling that together. And I'm ready to move on to another area. So I think what I'm going to do, set that brush aside for a minute. I'm going to pick up my smaller brush. So this is the 14 Bright Kolinsky. And we're going to come in and get these nice highlights in here, and that way I can start putting the background in. So I like to make my highlights a combination of strokes between warmer highlights and cooler highlights. And so I'll come in with really light yellowy whites, and then I'll work back and put in some kind of pinkish whites. And then sometimes I'll even add in blues and greens. Not real dark blues and greens, but just whites that have real slight hints. That just makes it much more interesting. And then before I come in and do all of that fluff, I need to put the background in, and then I can start pulling colors into each other. Sharon is from Central Texas. Love the colors. Great to hear your concepts as you create. Thanks, Sharon. I'm glad you're finding value in that. Just looking for those little pops of light. And just gradually building it up a little at a time. Okay, now we've got, I'm going to work with more whites, but as you come down here, this white is in shadow and it's much cooler. So now I'm going to mix up a cooler white. So I'm adding little bits of green and kind of making kind of a turquoise tone. And I err towards the darker side because I can always pop in a lighter highlight on top if I need to. Kind of thinking about the structure again and the curvature. And while I have this cool highlight, I'm going to look for areas where I can just pop this in next to those warmer highlights, like right in there, just to create some value changes, some temperature shifts. Just makes it interesting. Let's see, this in here might need to be a little cooler, so I'm going to pull in a little more blue. So even though it's white tufts of fur, it's in shadow and it's cooler. And it's darker. So what's everybody been doing this week? Pat says, I like what you said. Let's see, I'm having a hard time seeing it because it's light. When you're the artist, you're the boss. Yes. So you get to do what you want. That's right. So true. Let's see, Deborah's asking, are all of the bright, vibrant colors used for the underpainting because they are the tones that you see in the photo? Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. So that's kind of a loaded question. I think about the outcome of the colors and what is going to be a good platform to make those colors really stand out. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking whenever I'm putting those undertones in. Okay, so we've got a little bit more cool tones. I'm going to even add more blue, punching that up. Getting a really pretty blue. A little bit of blue tone right in here. So even though this is a cool color, it still can be considered to be a highlight. Kathy says, when I paint the cow, I may have to leave the wild colors. Yeah, my daughter was saying the same thing. She's like, keep it purple and pink, Mom. Which you very well could do. All right, it's taking some of these blue tones down onto the nose to get some highlights and depth. Going a little more purple right at the top. I don't want to cover all of that up. Taking some of that. As it curves, it's going to get darker. It's moving away from the light. All right, looking for other places I can use that beautiful blue. So let's go to the cowbell, and I'm just going to lay in a little of the color. That looks like a good place to put it. I'm going to warm that blue up a little bit. So in my palette, I always have warm and cool colors of each of my colors. So even though blues, greens, and violets are considered to be cool colors, they can lean warmer or cooler. So I have a couple. I have a warm and a cool of the blues, a warm and a cool of the reds, etc., etc. Let's see, it gets darker up there. We can pop in a little blue there. All right. Let me go back to the highlights, and I'm gonna, like I said, we're gonna put in a little bit of pink highlights. We've got those yellow, sunny highlights, and then we can get that background in. I brought in another phone today so I can look and watch the time. So we've got plenty of time. So I'm just creating kind of a blush by adding some pink tone into my white. So it's mainly going to be white, but it's going to have a hint of blush. So this is going to be look a little different, and I don't know how much of a difference you can see on the camera, but it's just a slight shift, and that's what makes that light kind of dance around on the surface by changing those little colors up. And over here, what I'm going to do now is pop in just some straight white right in through here. It's really light. And I have to be careful about using just the straight white because it can tend to run a little bit more cold, believe it or not. So I use it in conjunction with those yellowy highlights in pink tones. And that way, if I put those yellowy highlights on and it doesn't feel like it's quite light enough, if I pop in a little white on top, and I'll just show you right now what I mean, then it just creates that vibrancy and that beautiful light. And again, I don't know how much of that you can actually see on film, but I'm starting to get thicker with my strokes. Okay, let's, I want to pop in this edge here. Thinking about how I want to do that. It's not nearly as lit as the top of the cow and the ears. And it's a little warmer. And it's got a little hint of orange there already. But I think what I'm going to do is just pop in, let's just do this. Pop in a little orange, and as I work down, I'm going to tone that orange down just a little bit. So just a quick little description of my online course. Whenever you're watching the lessons, I spend a lot of time describing each of the colors. You see all the colors I'm working with, and the camera is on both the palette and close-up of the painting. So I talk about how to do every stroke, how to mix your colors, how to layer your colors. So it's very detailed. All right, there's more to do in here, but I really want to get to the background because that's going to kind of tie it together. So I'm going back to my 28 Bright, and I really haven't even decided yet what color I want my background to be. I'm not going to do what's in the photo. We're just going to go with more solid color tones. I'm not going to worry about making it look like a landscape, like he's out to pasture or anything. So we've got purples and pinks. So I can either go with a gray neutral, but there's a lot of grays in here. Oh gosh, what do we want to do? I just don't even know. Let me start down here. I don't want to go bright down here. As a matter of fact, I'm going to use the same kind of color tone here that we did. It's a really light orangey yellow, and then I'm pulling in some green. This will just kind of warm the painting up a little bit, I think, and I can get some of those really big strokes in and even let some of that orange color peek through, because that kind of helps to create that backlighting. And we just let that kind of work up into the painting, and just let some of those little peaks of blue show, because that really adds a nice interest to the painting instead of covering every little thing. I think what I'm going to do back here is go with a really light, kind of a neutral turquoise. When in doubt, turquoise is always a good color, right? One of my favorites. Cindy says, I love being part of the monthly online course. Chris Branley is an awesome instructor. Thank you so much, Cindy. I appreciate that. So glad to have you in the course. I've got a loose brush hair coming out, trying to fix. Never fun when those sneak out. I think as we move over, I'm going to get a little darker. As we come down here. And I will come in and join these edges. I'm just letting a little bit of space happen between those for now, so that I can come back and kind of pull those thick strokes out into each other. Coming in a little closer. If I touch that really light color right now, it's going to pull it into the background, which I don't want quite yet. All right, going back to my smaller brush, and I'm going to start kind of pulling these a little closer in. These little edges. Don't want to cover all of them. I like some of that blue in there. I want to kind of reshape this horn. So towards the end is when I start kind of slowing down a little bit and paying a little bit more attention to refining those edges. All of those spontaneous strokes that I made earlier, I kind of go back and check those and see if there's anything that just looks awry, and just start refining and pulling edges together and popping in fun, unexpected color. Okay, so now we can fluff up that fur a little bit. So I'm going to make sure my brush is really clean and really dry. And then we're going to take that thick paint and just start kind of pulling it up into the background. Getting the fluff in. Adding more paint if I need to. And while I've got that color, I'm going to just put a little highlight right on this edge. Does it feel like there's a glare? It looks a little, I'm looking at the screen, it looks a little washed out. Tyler, would you mind turning that light away from the painting a little bit? Let's see what happens. Abigail says, love this part. Thank you, me too. It's one of the funnest parts of the paintings. Just that end and softening those edges and popping in those fun colors. Let's see, we've got some fuzzy stuff going on down here. I've got to add more paint because it's not quite pulling in like I want it to. It's a little better. This is where you have to really take your time and not get too carried away by just putting one stroke in after another. Take that time to clean out your brush. Just popping in some thicker paint. Really emphasizing those highlights. And there's probably more refining and stuff I can do there, but I'm going to go ahead and move to another area, kind of get some of this detailing in. So we've got a nice little highlight on the eye there, which really, that undertone kind of takes care of that, but I want to go a little lighter. Taking the corner of the brush, and it helps if you have a maul stick or something. I've got my other arm I can kind of rest my hand on and get in. I also move my hand up when I'm doing detail because it can give me a tighter grip. This is not a place I want to stay though, because then the whole painting will be tight, and the point of Impressionism is to keep it loose. And that stroke went a little bit awry, but I can take my dry brush and just come back, and it's just a kind of a back and forth motion. This in here bothers my eye a little bit. We've got this harsh edge, so I'm going to soften that. And as I did that, I took a little paint off, but that's okay. I can always come back in and add that back in. All right, I'm going to come back here with some of these brown tones and bring them over onto the face. Going back to my neutrals. Making sure whenever I mix, I really take the time to make sure it's mixed thoroughly so I don't end up with little streaks. And you can cover as much or little of that undertone as you want. Hey, Patrick. He says, I just love all the different colors. Looks fun. Thank you. And Abigail says, how do you get the grid lines on your iPad? It sure does help with getting it more right when getting started. Yes, the grid lines are very helpful in getting a more accurate placement of your objects. And I use an app called Jackson's Art Grid. So it's a free app that you can get. Very helpful. Just going back and forth and looking and seeing what all needs to be refined or worked. I'm going to start punching in some kind of pink grays, so they're still neutral, but now they're going to lean towards a different color. A little warmer on this side, and I pulled in some of that orange, which I like. It's nice when you have kind of unexpected little surprises happen. Just going back and forth with those temperatures. All right, one thing I need to do is get this bell in. Let's see, I think I'm going to lean a little more bluish. Kind of a warm blue without taking away from the purple. And as we come up, it does get lighter. So I'm going to even warm that and go a little bit more turquoise. Right here at the top. Taking that same highlight right in through here. I'm going to punch that dark color back in on this side. Nice and dark. All right, even though we can't see it in the photograph, he's got little eyelashes if you look really close in. So one way to do that is to take a little bit of thick paint and pull it down. So let's see, I'm gonna try a couple different things. Just mixing up kind of a mid bluish gray. See if I can do this without messing it up. And we're just gonna do a dry brush. Sometimes it goes well on the first try, and sometimes we have to redo it. So let's see what happens here. Just to get a little. Get my paint a little thicker right across here. Very tricky. And then he also kind of needs a highlight. And there's not really a highlight in the photograph. Sometimes the camera just doesn't pick up all those little details. But it's important to do that because it's going to help make the cow look a little bit, the eye look a little bit more alive and glossy. Pop one in right there. Let's see what happens. That helps. All highlight, and I want to add in some really warm oranges in the ear. Really want that light to look like it's kind of glowing and pulling through, and it neutralizes over here on this side. So it's still orangey, but I'm kind of pulling in a grayish blue to neutralize that. I think I need to go a little bit more blue. Yeah, that up against the pink really makes that pink stand out. And I think that if I lighten that just a tad bit, that might be a good color for the fur. Got too much orange in my brush. Okay, just kind of a neutral blue, neutral turquoise, right in through here. I'm gonna pull that into the ear. Give them some fluff. I need to go cooler and darker. Okay, I think that works. I need to reshape that portion. There we go. That really popped. So sometimes if you feel like you're losing something, if you just think about placing a complement next to it, like this was kind of getting lost. And so this is kind of orangey pink, so I took an opposite color, like a purpley blue, and that helped to pop that out quite a bit. Okay, now we're gonna come in, I'm gonna pull some of these little strokes of fur down. Looking to see where I can push things cooler and darker. This under here is too light. So all those little final details really make a difference. Okay, we're going to finish off these highlights. And I'm totally fine with some of those going really big and long, because it just kind of pulls the cow into the background and it kind of softens some of those edges. So we want the focal point to be on his face. So if all of this back in here were really sharp and harsh, then you're not having that contrast where the eye is getting more focused and pulled in to where the face is. So it helps to kind of come in and soften some of those edges. I'm going to pull in some pinks, kind of orangey pinks, right in here. And I'm going to look and see where else I can pop pretty colors like that. Just little fun strokes at the end. Things you don't see in the picture. It's very intuitive. So if you get to a point where you just are constantly practicing, painting every day as much as you can, it's just going to start being a lot more natural in kind of thinking about how you want those pops of color and just having fun with it. I'm just going to take a pop of that right there. Maybe right there. And we've got kind of some green, cooler highlights down here on the bottom. Right along the edge here. Let's see, I'm going to pull some of this right up along the edge there. And I think we need a little warmth on this bell. So I'm going to come in with a reddish orange along the side here. Let's see, maybe right in through here. Let's just pop in a little warmth. Maybe right along the edge there. All right, we are just about at the end, guys. Got about 3 more minutes, so I am just going to work up until the end. But I did want to mention to you that if you go on my website, chrisbrandley.com, that's where you'll find my online course, and I've got in-person classes coming up and retreats for France and Italy. So Italy is in October. So we're kind of waiting. Registration is open, but we're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with that and if Italy's going to totally open up or not. I think by then they will. And then France is next summer. And I've got 2 sessions, and session 1 is already almost completely full. So if you're interested, be thinking about your schedule, and those tend to fill pretty quickly. So you want to get in on that. And then I've got a local workshop coming up and one in Florida next spring. So lots of stuff on the agenda. Also, you can get 3 free lessons if you go onto my website and scroll down to the bottom. And you'll find those free lessons you can sign up for. So anyway, let me just switch this around real quick. Just wanted to tell you guys again, thank you so much for watching. And here's the finished painting. Oops, let me switch that around again. I'd rather you see the painting than me anyway. So I might do some little finishing touches, but for the most part, it's done. So appreciate you guys jumping in and watching. Hope you have a great week, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.